The mirror of silence. The morning light slipped softly through the half-drawn curtains of a small Los Angeles cafe where Keanu Reeves sat alone, staring into his cup of coffee. People passed by outside, some recognizing him, some pretending not to. To the world, he was a mystery wrapped in calmness. The movie star who smiled politely, the man who never raised his voice, the actor who always chose the quiet corner instead of the spotlight. But behind that calm silence lived a story few had ever known. A story that was not about fame, but about kindness hidden in plain sight. The cafe owner, an elderly woman named Maria, had known Keanu for years. She said he always left a big tip, but never his name. Yet that morning she sensed something different. There was a faint sadness in his eyes, something deeper than the usual stillness. She gently placed a plate of pancakes before him and whispered, "Rough day?" Keanu smiled softly, just thinking how people see only the surface of things. Outside, cameras flashed at a group of fans who had gathered by chance. One shouted his name, another called for a picture. Keanu nodded, walked out, and took photos with each one. He didn't rush, didn't hide, didn't act. He simply listened. A little boy tugged his sleeve and said, "My mom says you're the kind man from the movies." Keanu knelt, smiled, and said quietly, "Your mom sounds like a kind person herself." When the boy left, a journalist nearby, hoping for gossip, muttered to his assistant, "He's too good to be true." Keanu overheard but only smiled. Inside, though, his mind drifted back years, to the time when kindness wasn't something people believed in him for, but something he had to learn the hard way. That night, after a long day on set, he took the subway home. Yes, the subway, and a choice that confused many, but to him it was peace. The train's soft hum drowned out the world's noise. Across from him sat a tired construction worker with grease on his hands, asleep, head leaning against the pole. Keanu noticed the man's lunchbox slipping. Quietly, he reached out and steadied it before it fell. No one noticed. No cameras. No applause. Just silence. A few stops later, an old lady entered with a heavy bag. No one moved. Keanu stood, offered his seat, and smiled. "Thank you, young man," she said softly. "Most don't even look up these days." He nodded. "Sometimes we forget small kindness is still kindness." When he got off, the guard at the station called after him. "Hey, you look familiar." Keanu smiled. "People tell me that sometimes." He waved, disappearing into the cool night air, his black coat brushing against the wind. That same night, across town, a blogger posted a grainy video of Keanu sitting with a homeless man sharing food. It wasn't new, but it went viral again. Comments poured in. "He's the purest soul in Hollywood? Is this even real? How can someone so famous live so simple?" Yet for Keanu, it was never about image. The truth was, those moments of giving were never for the world to see. They were small promises he had made long ago. Years earlier, when his sister had fallen ill, Keanu spent months quietly caring for her. The press never knew. While films were delayed and fans wondered about his disappearance, he was in hospital corridors, learning patience and resilience. He had whispered to her once, "When you get better, I'll build something good in the world." And even though she did recover, that promise stayed alive in him, hidden under his silence. One afternoon, on a film set, a young technician accidentally dropped an expensive camera lens. Panic spread. The crew froze. The boy looked terrified. Before the director could shout, Keanu walked over, picked up the pieces, and said gently, "Don't worry. Everyone breaks something once." Then he quietly paid for the repair. The boy never forgot that moment. Years later, he would become a respected cinematographer and still say that one act of kindness had changed his life. But there was another truth, deeper still. Not all kindnesses come without pain. Keanu often said in interviews, "Grief and kindness are twins." People quoted it, printed it on posters, shared it online, but they never knew where it came from. That truth was born from a night he never spoke about, the night he lost someone he loved. The quiet streets, the unanswered phone calls, the empty space beside him. Those were the shadows that taught him that silence can heal. And that empathy is sometimes built from pain. The public saw calmness, But calmness came after storms. Humility came after heartbreak. And kindness, real kindness, came after loss. The next morning, as the sun rose, Keanu visited a small park near downtown. There, he often met people who didn't know who he was, retirees feeding pigeons, students sketching trees, and a janitor named Samuel who always greeted him with a smile. "Morning, Mr. Quiet," Samuel joked. "Morning, Samuel," Keanu said, handing him a coffee. "You ever think people notice the wrong things?" Samuel chuckled. "All the time. They see faces, not hearts." Keanu nodded. "Yeah, maybe that's why I prefer quiet places." What he didn't know was that Samuel, the janitor, had a secret too, one that would soon connect their lives in a way Keanu never expected. Because in that park, kindness wasn't one-sided. It was waiting to return, and as the wind moved through the trees, carrying the sound of distant laughter and passing cars, Keanu's story, the truth behind his public image, was just beginning to unfold. The cameras had only seen his face, but soon the world would see the heart behind it. The janitor's story. The next morning came softly, with a calm, gray sky and the smell of fresh rain hanging over the city. Keanu walked back to the same park where he always found peace before the chaos of the day began. He carried 2 coffees again, one for himself and one for Samuel, the janitor who always seemed to appear just when the world felt too heavy. Samuel was already there, sweeping the path near the benches. His movements were slow but steady, his back bent slightly, his uniform faded from years of sun and dust. When he saw Keanu approaching, he smiled, showing lines that spoke more of kindness than age. "You always bring me coffee," Samuel said quietly. "And you always clean the same park I sit in," Keanu replied with a small grin. "I'd say we're even." They sat together under the same tree as the day before. For a few minutes, neither spoke. People walked past, children ran with kites, and pigeons fought over crumbs. It was the kind of silence that didn't need to be broken. But then, out of nowhere, Samuel said something that caught Keanu's attention. "You know," he began softly, "I've seen your face on screens and posters for years. But I didn't recognize you when you first came here. You didn't walk like a man who wanted to be noticed." Keanu smiled. "Maybe that's the best way to live, not being noticed." Samuel nodded. "You remind me of my son. He used to say things like that too." "Used to?" Keanu asked carefully. Samuel sighed. "He passed away. A few years ago. Car accident." His eyes softened, his voice trembling. "He was 22, loved movies, wanted to be a filmmaker. He used to say he'd make a movie about real kindness one day. Said the world needed it." Keanu sat quietly, feeling the weight of those words. Grief was something he understood too well. He looked at Samuel, his own memories flickering, the people he had lost, the faces that never left his mind, the promises he still carried in silence. After a long pause, he said gently, "I'm sorry, Samuel. I know how that feels." Samuel turned to him, surprised by the honesty in his tone. "You've lost someone too?" Keanu nodded slowly. "More than one. But loss teaches you what stays, and sometimes kindness is what stays." Samuel's eyes glistened. "That's something my wife used to say before she got sick. She believed small acts can outlive us." The air between them grew quiet again. For a few minutes, neither moved. But in that silence, something deep connected them. A shared understanding that came from pain, not words. As days passed, their routine became unspoken. Keanu would bring 2 coffees every morning. Samuel would sweep the path, and together they'd sit under the same old tree, watching the world pass by. One morning, a little girl dropped her drawing near their bench. It was a simple picture, 2 people holding hands beside a tree. She smiled shyly and said, "It's you 2. I see you here every day." Samuel laughed softly, while Keanu looked at the drawing for a long moment. "You see more than most adults," he said kindly. "Thank you." When the girl ran off, Samuel whispered, "That's what my son wanted to capture in his movies. The little things people overlook." Keanu looked up. "Maybe it's time someone helped his dream live on." Samuel frowned, not understanding. Keanu continued, I know some people in the industry. Maybe I can start something small, a short film. Maybe a project for young storytellers who can't afford big studios. We could call it something like Unseen Kindness. Samuel stared at him, stunned. You'd really do that? For a boy you never met? Keanu nodded slowly. Because I met his father. There was no applause, no crowd, just the sound of wind and rustling leaves. But in that moment, something sacred passed between them. A promise built not from fame or pity, but from shared humanity. That evening, when Keanu went home, he pulled out a small notebook he always carried. It was filled with notes, quotes, and pieces of poetry he never showed anyone. On the last page, he wrote, "To honor unseen kindness, not with words, but with action." The next few weeks moved quietly but meaningfully. Keanu started reaching out to a few trusted friends, a screenwriter, a small production team, and a charity group that supported young creatives. He told them about the idea without mentioning Samuel's name, keeping his privacy intact. One of his friends, Nina, asked him, "Why this project, Keanu? You already support so many causes," he replied simply, "because sometimes kindness doesn't need a reason. It just needs a beginning." Back in the park, Samuel continued his routine, unaware that something beautiful was forming behind the scenes. One afternoon, when Keanu came by, Samuel wasn't there. Only his broom leaned against the bench, and the air felt heavier than usual. The next day, still no sign of him. Keanu asked around. The flower vendor, the security guard, even the little girl who drew them. No one had seen Samuel. Worry settled in. Days passed. Then finally, a week later, a young woman approached Keanu in the park. She looked tired but kind. "Are you the man who always brought my father coffee?" Keanu's heart sank. "You're Samuel's daughter?" She nodded, holding back tears. "He passed away 2 nights ago. He spoke of you, said you were the kind stranger who made him believe his son's dream could live again." Keanu stood still, his breath caught in his throat. The world around him blurred for a moment. She handed him something, an old folded photograph. It showed Samuel with his son, both smiling, both standing beside a film camera made from cardboard. On the back, it said in faded ink, "For the story yet to be told." Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, then whispered, "We'll tell it, Samuel. I promise." From that day, everything changed. He stopped calling it a project. It became a mission. The Unseen Kindness Initiative, a program to support young filmmakers from humble backgrounds, to tell stories that mattered, to show that real heroes aren't always on screens. And when the first short film premiered quietly at a small community hall, the credits ended with a single line, "In memory of Samuel and all who believe kindness can outlive pain." As the lights dimmed, a few people in the crowd wiped tears, not knowing the full story behind that line. But somewhere, deep in that silence, it felt like Samuel's son's dream had finally come alive. Keanu walked out into the cool night, looking up at the stars. His public image would always be the calm, mysterious actor. But in truth, behind that silence was a man who kept promises no one knew he made. And as he walked down the empty street, the streetlights flickering softly, he whispered to himself, "Some stories are not meant to be watched. They're meant to be felt." The world still saw only his face, but those who looked closer were beginning to see the kindness hidden behind it. Piece by piece, like light breaking through the fog, the letter that changed everything, days turned into weeks after the small film screening. But the echoes of that night stayed with Keanu. Every time he saw a young artist smile with hope, he thought of Samuel. Every time he heard someone speak about kindness in art, he thought of Samuel's son. The Unseen Kindness Initiative began to grow quietly. Without media noise, without billboards, without his name printed anywhere. The funds came from Keanu's own earnings, though few people ever knew. He often said, "If it's about kindness, let it be nameless." One rainy evening, as Keanu sat in his modest apartment surrounded by books and old photos, an envelope slipped under his door. No name, just his address in small, shaky handwriting. He opened it carefully. Inside was a letter written on thin paper, folded twice. The letter began simply, Dear Mr. Reeves, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted to tell you something important. As Keanu read further, his eyes slowed over each line. I was part of the small film project you started, the one about unseen kindness. My short film was about my mother, who works nights at a hospital. I wanted to show her life, her strength, and her kindness that no one ever notices. I never had money for film school. Your initiative made it possible. But there's something you don't know. Samuel, the janitor you used to meet in the park, was my uncle. He never told you because he didn't want pity. He told me once that you made him believe the world still had good people. I want you to know his son's dream, my cousin's dream, now lives through my film. Thank you for keeping it alive. Keanu set the letter down. His throat tightened. Rain tapped softly against the window as he looked out into the dark night. The world outside was loud, flashing lights, voices, noise, but inside, everything was still. He whispered quietly, Samuel had a nephew, and I didn't even know. He read the letter again, slower this time. Every word carried weight, every sentence felt like a heartbeat. Attached to the letter was a small USB drive labeled The Light That Stayed. He plugged it into his laptop. The screen lit up. The film opened with an image of a hospital corridor at dawn, a woman in a nurse's uniform cleaning floors, smiling faintly as people hurried past her. The narrator's voice was soft, emotional. This is my mother. She works while others sleep. She gives when no one sees. She's tired, but she still smiles. This story is for her, and for everyone whose kindness never gets noticed. As the film played, Keanu leaned forward, lost in the emotion. Scenes shifted. A mother helping an old patient eat. A quiet sunrise after a long shift. The same woman returning home to cook for her children. No music, just real sounds, footsteps, breathing, quiet laughter. The last line of the film appeared on the screen. Kindness doesn't need light to shine. It creates its own. Keanu sat there long after the video ended. He felt something deep. Not sadness, not happiness, but something in between. It was the feeling of purpose. The next morning, he wrote back to the sender. Dear friend, your letter found me at the right time. I never knew Samuel had a nephew, but I'm sure he would be proud of you. Your film is more than a story. It's a reminder. Thank you for letting me see kindness through your eyes. With respect, Keanu. He mailed it quietly, without a return address. Weeks later, word began to spread. Small film festivals across the country started showcasing The Light That Stayed. Audiences cried. Critics called it raw and beautiful. But what no one knew was that behind its creation stood a man who wanted no credit, a man who believed the best stories are born from silence. One afternoon, while Keanu was on a set filming a new movie, a young production assistant approached him nervously. She looked barely out of college. Mr. Reeves, she said softly. Can I ask you something? He nodded, smiling. Of course, she took a breath. Is it true you helped fund the Unseen Kindness Project? Keanu froze slightly, not used to hearing its name spoken aloud. Who told you that? She smiled shyly. My brother was one of the filmmakers. He said a silent donor gave him a chance to tell his story. It changed his life. Keanu's eyes softened. Then I'd say your brother's story changed mine too. She looked at him for a moment, trying to understand. Why don't you tell people about it? It could inspire millions, he smiled faintly, looking away. Because kindness isn't louder when you talk about it. It's stronger when you live it. The girl stood quietly, as if she wanted to say more, but couldn't. She nodded and walked away, leaving Keanu in deep thought. That night after filming ended, Keanu went home again. Same apartment, same quiet room. He looked at Samuel's old photograph one more time. Then, for the first time in months, he opened a small wooden box at the corner of his shelf. Inside were 3 items: a subway ticket, a crumpled napkin with a child's drawing, and a silver ring. The ticket reminded him of the first night he met Samuel, the night he steadied the lunchbox for a sleeping worker. The napkin carried the drawing of the little girl who had sketched him and Samuel under the tree. And the ring. The ring belonged to someone he had lost long ago, someone whose absence taught him the meaning of kindness. As he held the ring, his eyes grew wet. "You'd have liked Samuel," he whispered to the empty room. "He reminded me of you." A sudden knock broke his silence. It was late. He opened the door to find the same young production assistant standing there holding a small parcel. "This came for you at the studio," she said. Inside was another envelope. No name, just one word on the front: "Return." Curious, he opened it. Inside were several old photographs. One showed a community kitchen filled with smiling volunteers. Another showed a shelter with new beds, clean clothes, and painted walls. In the corner of one photo, Keanu's face appeared faintly in the background, helping lift boxes, unnoticed. A handwritten note lay beneath the pictures. "You helped us years ago. You probably don't remember, but the shelter you volunteered at saved my life. I used to be one of those who came for food. Now, I'm one of those who serve. Thank you for reminding me that even small kindnesses can echo for years." There was no signature, no return address, just a sentence at the end. "What you give away quietly always finds its way back." Keanu leaned against the doorframe, holding the note close. Outside, the city lights shimmered like small pieces of hope. It struck him deeply. Every act, no matter how small, had a way of circling back. Maybe kindness didn't need recognition, but it never truly disappeared. It found its way from one soul to another, like invisible light passing through generations. That night, as Keanu sat by the window watching the rain, he realized something profound. His public image, the quiet man, the humble star, the polite actor, was never the full truth. People saw his silence as mystery, but in truth, it was gratitude. Gratitude for the kindness that had once saved him, shaped him, and guided him to give it forward. And deep down, he knew. The world didn't need to know who he was. It only needed to remember why kindness mattered. But something else was waiting for him. An invitation that would soon challenge everything he believed about staying silent. And it would begin with one unexpected phone call. The call that broke his silence. The phone rang late at night, long after the city had fallen quiet. Keanu was sitting by the window, lost in thought, still holding the letter from the shelter volunteer. Rain whispered against the glass, soft and steady. He almost didn't answer, thinking it was another wrong number, but something in the timing felt strange, like life was about to turn a quiet page. He picked up the phone. A gentle voice spoke from the other end. "Mr. Reeves? This is Elena Marshall. I'm a journalist with the Global Kindness Foundation. Please don't hang up. This isn't about gossip or movies." Keanu hesitated but didn't disconnect. "Go on," he said softly. "I'm sorry for calling this late," Elena continued, her tone calm and respectful. "But I've been researching silent charity programs, especially ones without public names. One of them, the Unseen Kindness Initiative, keeps leading back to you. I know you never wanted it revealed, but people deserve to know the truth. This could inspire millions." Keanu sighed quietly. "Truth doesn't always need a headline." Elena paused. "I understand. But if people saw the man behind the silence, maybe it would teach them that fame can be gentle, that success can still be kind." For a long time, he said nothing. The only sound was the rain. Finally, he asked, "What do you really want from me, Elena?" She replied softly, "A conversation, not an interview. I just want to understand why you've chosen to hide something so good." Keanu agreed to meet her the next morning at the same cafe where Maria, the old owner, still served pancakes and coffee. He didn't know why he said yes. Maybe he wanted to protect the story before others twisted it. Maybe deep down he was tired of people only seeing fragments of him, the actor, the meme, the mystery, but never the real man behind it. The cafe was nearly empty when he arrived. Elena was already there, a woman in her early 30s with tired eyes but a warm smile. She looked nervous yet kind, holding a small recorder in her hand. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," Keanu replied, smiling faintly. They sat down and Maria served them both without saying a word. understanding the quiet gravity of the moment. Elena began carefully. You've done so much good quietly. Shelters, scholarships, the film project. Most people spend fortunes just to be seen doing good. But you disappear after helping. Why? Keanu looked at his coffee, the steam rising slowly. Because kindness isn't a show. When it becomes one, it stops being kindness. But don't you think people could learn from it? She asked. He looked up, his eyes calm but deep. Maybe. But sometimes, when you tell the world about something pure, the world tries to own it. And then it loses its meaning. Elena's voice softened. So the world never gets to see the real you. Keanu smiled faintly. Maybe the real me isn't that interesting. She leaned forward slightly. But you're wrong. People already see your face everywhere. In interviews, memes, fan videos. They call you the internet's kindest man, but they only know the shadow, not the source. His expression changed slightly, thoughtful but cautious. And maybe that's enough. I'm not sure the world needs to know where kindness starts. It only needs to see where it leads. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Before you decide, please read this. He unfolded the letter inside. It was written in familiar handwriting. His hands trembled slightly as he realized it was from Samuel, dated months before his death. Dear Keanu, if you ever doubt that what you're doing matters, remember this, even quiet kindness makes noise in someone's heart. If you ever have the chance to speak, speak not for yourself, but for the ones who can't. Your silence is noble, but your story could wake souls. Keanu stared at the paper for a long time. His voice came out barely above a whisper. Where did you get this? Elena replied softly. His daughter gave it to me. She wanted you to have it. She said he wrote it after you started the Unseen Kindness Project, but he never got to send it. Keanu placed the letter gently on the table, his chest tight. For the first time in a long while, he felt torn between his heart and his instinct for silence. Elena watched him quietly. You don't have to agree to an interview, she said softly. But maybe a single message, one moment of truth, could reach someone who's given up on the idea of good people. Keanu nodded slowly. Maybe, but if I speak, it has to be real, not a headline, not a performance. That's all I want, she said. Something real. A week later, she arranged a small recording setup. No bright lights, no studio. Just a dimly lit library room with wooden shelves and quiet rain tapping on the windows. Keanu sat across from her, calm as always, but this time with something deeper in his eyes. The camera blinked red. Elena asked gently, Why do you give so much quietly? He thought for a long time before answering. Because once, when I had nothing, someone gave to me, and they didn't ask for thanks or fame. They just helped. I think the world forgets how powerful that is, helping without wanting anything back. Elena's voice trembled slightly. And what would you say to people who see kindness as weakness? Keanu looked directly at the camera, his tone soft but firm. Then they've never seen true strength. Real strength is walking through pain and still choosing to be kind. The recording continued. 40 minutes of calm, honest conversation. No drama, no performance, just truth. A few days later, the video quietly appeared online under the title Keanu Reeves, The Kindness No One Talks About. Elena uploaded it with his permission, keeping it simple. No flashy thumbnails, no sensational words. At first, views trickled in slowly, a few thousand, then tens of thousands, then millions. Not because of clickbait, but because people shared it saying, This made me cry. This gave me hope. This is how humanity should sound. In one clip, the most shared one, Keanu said softly, You don't have to be famous to make a difference. You just have to care enough to see someone's pain and not look away. Comments filled the page. Stories from strangers. A woman who started volunteering at a shelter. A boy who forgave his father. A man who reunited with his brother after years. Keanu didn't read them all, but Maria showed him one comment that stood out. It said, I was ready to end my life last month. Then I saw this video. I decided to live one more day and help someone else instead. Thank you for reminding me that kindness still exists. Keanu put down the phone, his hands shaking slightly. His eyes filled with quiet tears. It wasn't fame he felt. It wasn't pride. It was peace. The kind that comes when you realize something you did silently has touched lives you'll never meet. Elena later told him the video had inspired a global wave of kindness pledges. People began leaving letters, coffee cups with notes saying, "You're not alone." Strangers started small acts of good, not for recognition, but in memory of unseen kindness, and in the middle of all that, Keanu stayed the same. No new social media accounts, no interviews, no press tours. He still rode the subway, still tipped quietly, still smiled at strangers. But now, the world looked at him differently, not as a mystery, not as a celebrity, but as proof that silence could still speak louder than fame. And yet, deep inside, Keanu knew his story wasn't finished. Because one morning, as he walked into the park where it all began, a child ran up to him holding something small, a folded note that said, "He wanted you to see this." It was Samuel's handwriting again, and what was written inside would lead Keanu on a journey that would change not just him, but the meaning of kindness itself, the message from the past. The morning air was cool and still, carrying that faint scent of wet grass after rain. Keanu stood quietly in the park where everything had once begun, where Samuel swept the paths, where the pigeons fought for crumbs, where the girl had drawn them sitting beneath the old tree. Time had passed, but the place hadn't changed much. The same light, the same silence. The little boy who ran toward him stopped just a few steps away, his small hand clutching a folded piece of paper. "A lady told me to give you this," he said. "A lady?" Keanu asked softly. The boy nodded. "She said her name was Grace. She said you'd understand." Keanu thanked him and sat down on the old bench, the one that creaked slightly whenever he leaned back. His fingers trembled a little as he unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakable, Samuel's looping letters, written with care but fading with time. The note read, "Dear Keanu, if you're reading this, I guess my time in this world has already turned to memory. I didn't want to leave without saying what I couldn't say in person. Kindness isn't about what we give, it's about what we return. Every time we lift someone, they carry a part of us forward. Maybe that's how we live forever. There's a letter in my old home, an unfinished one my son wrote before he passed. I couldn't read it for years, but I think it's meant for you now. I asked Grace, an old friend, to keep it safe. Please find her. She knows where it is." Keanu folded the letter slowly, his heart heavy with quiet emotion. The park around him seemed to hum with life, distant laughter, the whisper of wind in leaves, footsteps of people passing, yet he felt suspended in stillness. He hadn't expected another chapter to unfold. He thought the story had already ended with Samuel's passing. But life had a way of weaving kindness through time, even beyond death. He left the park and called Elena, the journalist. She answered quickly. "Elena, do you remember Samuel's daughter?" "Yes," she said. "Why?" "I need her help. There's someone named Grace I have to find. Samuel mentioned her in a note." Elena agreed instantly. "I'll find her. Give me a day." By evening, Elena called back. "I found her, Keanu. She runs a small community center in Pasadena. She said she's been waiting for you." The next morning, Keanu drove down quietly, wearing his usual black jacket and simple jeans. The community center stood between a row of old brick buildings. Inside, children were painting on canvas, their laughter echoing in the hallways. A woman in her 60s greeted him near the entrance. "You must be Keanu," she said, smiling gently. "Samuel told me about you." Her name was Grace Mendez, a retired teacher who had once worked with Samuel's wife. She led him to a small office, its walls lined with photos of community events and handwritten notes from kids. "Samuel gave me something a few years before he passed," she said. "He made me promise not to open it until someone came for it, someone who'd understand silence, as he called it." She handed Keanu a worn envelope. It was sealed but thin, the paper yellowed from time. He held it carefully, sensing the weight of what it carried. "He said his son wrote it after meeting someone who changed how he saw life," Grace added softly. "Samuel believed that person was you." Keanu's breath caught for a moment. He looked at her in disbelief. "Me, but I never met his son," Grace nodded. "Maybe not directly, but you might have crossed paths without realizing." She left him alone in the room. The envelope felt fragile, almost sacred. He opened it slowly. Inside was a letter written in young handwriting, uneven, emotional, full of life. "Dear kind stranger," it began. You don't know me, but I saw you once. I was on a bus feeling lost. My dreams were dying faster than my courage. Then you sat down near an old man and spoke to him like he mattered. You didn't know I was watching, but you reminded me that people like you still exist. I didn't catch your name, but I told my dad about you. I told him the world might still be good if even one stranger can make someone feel seen. He smiled that day for the first time in weeks. Keanu stopped reading, his eyes glassy. He remembered that day years ago. He had been returning from a small film shoot, exhausted, sitting beside an elderly man on a bus. The man had said his son wanted to be a filmmaker but had given up. Keanu had told him, "Dreams don't die unless you stop feeding them." He never knew that man was Samuel. He looked back at the letter, hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for sitting with my father that day. You gave him hope, and through him, you gave it to me. I'm writing this because I want to believe kindness doesn't end where we do. If anything happens to me, tell him I finally finished my script. I called it The Quiet Ones for people like you." The letter ended there, no signature. No closing line, just white space and the faint smudge of dried tears. Keanu leaned back in his chair, staring at the paper for a long time. His throat felt tight. The puzzle pieces of years, the park, the subway, the project, the video, the messages, all connected. Kindness had traveled in circles, weaving through unseen moments. Grace returned quietly. "He believed that one act changed everything," she said. "It gave his father purpose, it gave his nephew hope. And now it's giving these children dreams." She gestured toward the hall where kids were still painting. Keanu smiled faintly, whispering, "It's never just one act, is it?" Grace shook her head. "Never. Kindness multiplies quietly." That evening, Keanu drove home with the letter beside him on the passenger seat. At every stoplight, he glanced at it as though afraid it might vanish. When he reached home, he placed it beside Samuel's photo on his shelf. He took a deep breath, then whispered, "We finally met, kid." Over the next few days, something grew inside him, not sadness, but purpose. He called Alina again. "I want to do something more," he said. "What do you mean?" she asked. "Samuel's son wrote a script called The Quiet Ones. I want to make it not as a big film, but as a small tribute. Real people, real moments, the way he saw the world." Alina's voice trembled. "You mean produce it?" "No," Keanu said softly. "Live it. Make it with the people he inspired, the students, the volunteers, the quiet ones." Within months, the Quiet Ones began production, not under Hollywood's bright lights, but in humble places. Parks, hospitals, community halls. The cast included people from the Unseen Kindness Initiative, local kids, even Samuel's daughter and Grace. Keanu refused any credit or payment. When the short film premiered, it was streamed online for free. No red carpet, no sponsors, just a dedication at the end. For those who keep kindness alive without needing to be seen. The film spread slowly but deeply. People across the world watched it late at night and felt something awaken, a quiet ache, a soft courage, a reminder that even silent hearts can change the world. One comment under the film simply said, "I used to think I was invisible. Now I see that invisibility can be light too." And somewhere deep down, Keanu felt that same light. But the story wasn't over. A letter had brought him to this point, and one more message was still waiting. One that would reveal the most unexpected truth of all, the final thread connecting kindness, loss, and the face the world thought they already knew. The final truth, the morning light fell through the window of Keanu's home like soft gold. It had been a few weeks since the release of The Quiet Ones, the film born from a letter, a promise, and a friendship that had outlived its own time. The world had reacted in silence first, and then in waves. Small communities began their own kindness projects. Filmmakers wrote stories without sponsors. Schools started quiet circles where children could share anonymous good deeds. Yet Keanu stayed out of the spotlight. He refused interviews. He didn't attend the small award ceremony that honored the quiet ones. Instead, he spent his days visiting shelters and community centers, helping without cameras, just like always. But one day, a letter arrived at his doorstep, sealed, simple, and marked only with 2 words, from Samuel's family. Keanu opened it slowly. Inside was a short note written by Samuel's daughter. "Dear Keanu, there's one last thing my father wanted you to see. It's a box he kept hidden in the small house near the park. He told me it was for the man who understood silence. It's yours now." The next morning, Keanu drove to Samuel's old house. It was a modest wooden home with a blue gate and a garden that had long since gone wild. The neighbors recognized him instantly, but he simply smiled and said, "I'm here for an old friend." Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old paper. The walls were lined with family photos, Samuel, his wife, his son, and later his daughter as a child. Near the window stood a wooden chest. It looked untouched for years. Keanu knelt beside it and slowly opened the lid. Inside were letters, photographs, and one small videotape labeled for the man from the bus. His hands shook slightly as he placed the tape into the old player still sitting beside the television. The screen flickered, and a soft static filled the room before an image appeared, a young man with dark hair and bright eyes sitting beside Samuel. It was Samuel's son. "Dad says I should make a video letter instead of writing," the young man said, smiling shyly at the camera. "He told me about the stranger on the bus who told him that dreams don't die unless you stop feeding them. That line, it stuck with me." He looked down for a moment, trying to hold back emotion. "I wanted to thank you, whoever you are. I didn't know your name, but that moment made me finish my film script. It's called The Quiet Ones. I hope one day it reaches someone else who needs hope, the same way you gave it to my dad." He paused again, the sound of wind faintly passing through the background. "If my dad ever finds you, please tell him this. I found peace in the dream you helped me see again. And if you ever feel tired, remember this. Sometimes you save people without knowing it." The screen froze there, the young man's calm face, full of life, full of something eternal. Keanu sat perfectly still, his eyes wet but unblinking. The silence in the room grew heavy, sacred, almost holy. For a long time he didn't move. Then quietly he whispered, "You found me, kid." The next few days felt different. The world outside moved as usual, but Keanu walked with a lighter heart. He carried with him the realization that kindness doesn't just travel forward, it circles back in ways unseen. One evening, Alina called. "I just saw the final letter," she said softly. "You changed more lives than you know. Do you ever wonder how it all started?" Keanu smiled faintly. "It started with someone else's kindness before mine." "Always before mine?" she asked. "What do you mean?" He looked out the window, remembering faces long gone. "When I was younger," he said quietly, "I lost my way. One night I sat on a street corner with nothing, no money, no direction. An old janitor gave me his sandwich and said, 'You'll be fine. The world just needs you to stay kind.' I never saw him again. But now I know that janitor was Samuel." Alina gasped softly through the phone. "Wait, the same Samuel?" Keanu nodded, his voice trembling. "Yes, he didn't remember me later, and I never told him. Maybe it wasn't meant to be remembered, maybe kindness only works when it's forgotten." The silence on the line stretched. Both understood the gravity of that truth. In the following months, the Quiet Ones became a global symbol, not for fame, but for empathy. People painted murals of unnamed faces doing quiet deeds. Schools played the film during assemblies. Shelters hung a single line on their doors: "You don't have to be seen to matter." But Keanu never gave a public statement about it again. He didn't need to. One night near the anniversary of Samuel's passing, Keanu returned to the park. It was almost empty, the air cool and silver with moonlight. He sat on the same bench under the same tree, a cup of coffee in his hand, and whispered, "We did it, my friend." As if in response, a small gust of wind brushed past, rustling the leaves softly, the same sound he used to hear when Samuel swept the path at dawn. He closed his eyes and smiled. In that moment, he wasn't the famous actor, the humble star, or the man the internet called the kindest soul in Hollywood. He was simply a man who had carried one act of kindness forward and watched it bloom into hundreds, then thousands. And in that quiet park where everything had begun, it all came full circle. Before leaving, Keanu noticed something at his feet, a small folded paper left under the bench. He picked it up. It was a child's drawing, just like the one from years ago. It showed two figures sitting under a tree, a sun above them, and a sentence written in uneven letters. "Kindness never really goes away. It just changes hands." Keanu looked around, but the park was empty. He smiled softly, his voice barely a whisper. "Thank you," he said to no one and everyone at once. Then he walked away, slow, peaceful, silent, as the first light of dawn painted the sky in soft gold. And somewhere across cities, across hearts, the Quiet Ones kept doing what they always did, giving, helping, healing, unseen, unnamed, but unforgettable. Because that was the truth behind Keanu Reeves' public image, kindness hidden in plain sight.